sometimes people apologize to me for having been religious. Always strikes me as weird. And you got to appreciate that when I have a chance to meet our listeners, it's kind of weird already. I mean, don't get me wrong. Some of the best podcasting memories I have and some of the best overall memories I have are the chances that we've had to meet our listeners, but it's still weird. I mean, I sit alone in a room or in a room with Heath or Lucinda, whatever, telling dick jokes to an inanimate object. That's my day-to-day routine. It's one of the most asocial jobs you can imagine. I mean, I know you're there. I know we're talking to somebody, but all I ever see is a download number. And on the rare occasion that I do get to meet any of you, I'm on this weird impotent end of the balance of conversational power, Depending on how long you've been listening, you more or less know me, but the only thing I know about you is that you have an affinity for a well-crafted dick joke. So my natural response is to try to reverse that a bit. It's the nature of this bizarre conversation we're engaged in. I always have the floor, so when I get a chance to meet you, neither of us want to talk about me. We talk about me every fucking week. We want to talk about you. What got you there? What demons did you have to fight through to get to this side of rationality? And look, I'm genuinely curious, even from just a purely self-serving angle, because my story is boring and easy. My parents were so lackadaisical about their religion that my rejection of faith was essentially a painless process of thinking to myself, well, this doesn't make any fucking sense. I didn't have to face any ostracization or any difficult conversations with my parents. I wasn't estranged from my spouse. There was no wedge driven between me and my kids. I lost no social standing or community. Hell, I wasn't even sacrificing that comforting fantasy about the omnipotent fiduciary with the omnipresent ear, since I'd never really talked myself into believing it in the first place. I just learned too much for any of it to make any sense anymore. And hell, I even had a head start on that since my parents were ostensibly Mormons. And then there's you. By a stroke of dispassionate fortune, I was airlifted over the labyrinth that you had to fight your way through. And I saw you down there. I could just barely make you out, but I saw you. And of course, from above, the dead ends betrayed themselves, and you looked like a fool wandering down a path that I could ultimately see would coil in on itself. You look like a fool walking into that unsprung trap around the corner that I could so easily see from above. So I watched you turning right when the exit was straight ahead and turning back when the path was about to straighten out. I watched you treading back over familiar passages, and I got so frustrated that I shouted down to you, but you could just barely hear me. I mean, even if you realized that you were the one I was shouting at, you couldn't make out my words. You couldn't understand me. And so I left you there. I got to the other side. I drew a map of what I could remember, and I meant to go back for you, but I never did. And now here we are years later, and you've made it through without my help or the fortuitous aerial view. I've been on the other side for years. I've had time to set up shop here, settle down, get a lay of the land, and here you are still nursing your minotaur wounds, and I see you across the field. I run up to you desperately trying to formulate my excuse for never venturing back into that labyrinth to find you, and before I can form the most feeble of pretexts, you apologize to me for being late. Imagine my surprise. And keep in mind that this happens to me a lot. At least once a week through email, but something like a dozen times just at Reason Rally. People would come up to me, introduce themselves, say a few kind words about the work we do, and then they would sheepishly admit that they only made their way out of church a few years ago. They're not ashamed of their scarlet letter, mind you. They're just ashamed it hasn't had time to fray. I mean, I guess I get it. When you come face to face with all the damage that religion does, there has to be a part of you that feels guilty for all the time you spent perpetuating it, but that doesn't change the fact that you were a victim. You may have laid a few new bricks while you were in there, but nobody should have put you in that labyrinth in the first place, and nobody should have built it, and the government shouldn't subsidize it, and nobody should have flown over the top of it in their youth and laughed at the people inside with a smug and unwarranted air of superiority. Look, I gave up nothing to be here, except maybe a less fun job that pays better. But when I meet a man in his 60s that was a devout Baptist until his late 50s, I know he's given up a lot of himself to get there. I know he had to come face to face with a lot of demons, a lot of lies he'd been told by the people that love him, and a lot of lies that he'd told to the people he loved. He had to simultaneously come to grips with both his culpability and his victimhood. He had to kick away pillars that had dammed back his doubts for decades and face that oncoming flood with no reward on the other side of it but knowledge. I've never done anything so daring in my life, and I don't know that I'd be able to muster the courage if I had to. That man is my hero, but he's more than that. He's also my muse. Because in addition to inspiring me with his courage, he also vindicates my purpose. See, I did go back up in that balloon. I'm floating over that labyrinth, shouting down right now. And what better way to mold my message than to learn what it's like on the inside from a person who never gave up the quest to get out?